Good morning. Welcome to RPG Breakfast Club. I'm Andy. I work with Vasa Games. I'm their project manager. I do a couple of other side projects that I'm working on, and I'm glad to be here.
I'm Todd. I run a website called Hex Press. I do some videos on YouTube, and I also help out here at the tavern, and I also work on my own materials.
And I am Pex, the tavern custodian. I help run behind-the-scenes work here at the tavern, as well as hassle people to come do these shows that don't really want to do them, but I make them do them anyway. For you guys. Because I love you.
And I'm Mage. I help Pex at the tavern, run random things behind the scenes, and I'm a traveling professor and DM.
I would like to go back to the harassing people to be on the show, and I would like those cookies I was promised.
They will be delivered promptly after the show in FedEx mail.
Yeah, that's what I heard after the last show, dude.
They're in the mail.
File it with FedEx. File it with FedEx.
This is what happens because we couldn't afford media mail.
I kind of hate FedEx. You think with GPS they wouldn't get lost so damn much?
That's a theory.
Awesome. All right. I guess the question is who wants to start off on the first topic?
I like
the
the
question
first one
is,
here.
what's the first topic is?
I just assumed you
Meaningful
went
travel
order.
and journey. I like that one. To me, meaningful travel means long travel, not like teleportation or any kind of fast travel. I like the exploration part of the game personally. I think that leads into the journey factor, where it's not really the destination that matters, it's what you do on your way there. And I feel like there's a lot of wiggle room in a sandbox type play style for that long travel that generates that journey to said destination. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah.
You have great thoughts.
So in depth with that. Yeah, I mean, meaningful travel is pretty much all the spots on a map that are not listed that you create or throw in. I also throw in teleportation and like fast traveling. Anything that is not a guaranteed A to B jaunt, I can futz with, and that's where the magic happens. I mean, what was it? We just had it happen the other night in a game I played in, where we've had a helm of teleportation for a couple of months now, and even though we have failed multiple times and we have all taken damage as a result of that failure, we still use it. And we have also landed anywhere between 3 days to 2 weeks and change outside of where we were supposed to, like, our destination. And the amazing side adventures and one-offs that we had from there were not things that were initially planned or intended. But we still eventually got to wherever our destination was.
Now, backtracking on what I said about teleportation, I don't mind like random teleportation, because I think recently the Frogs put out a book, the Invino Gigantus, where the adventure starts with a giant literally teleporting you up to where the adventure starts. That's how it starts. You're literally in the hand of a giant kind of deal. I find that kind of stuff cool. As far as
you're
like,
talking more about like teleportation circles or guaranteed fast travel mechanics that have no room for error.
Right, like gateway type travel, like Stargate style kind of deal. Versus like sliders, you never know where you're gonna end up. And movie, TV show references. There you go.
So, okay. Meaningful travel. Isn't this kind of like what is it? It's a song. You know, it's about the journey, not the destination. It's really not about how you get there or how long it takes you to get there. It's about what the heck happened on the way, right?
Exactly.
So I don't care how they get there. They can teleport. They can ride horses. They can ride apparently dogs, unicorns, who knows. Apparently I've got one who's riding a rhinoceros in a game. It's not even a game I'm running, but she has a woolly rhinoceros. It's about all the ideas and mayhem and stories that they develop going there. That's what makes it meaningful, which I think is why you're not so pleased with the idea of a guaranteed teleport gateway type of thing, because then there's no journey.
Right. I mean, how boring would Lord of the Rings been if the Eagles just took them to Mount Doom and they just plucked the ring down in the hole of the volcano?
All right. Evil thought process, possibly. Do you think that this type of thing has to do with... Okay, so some of us who are old, who read Lord of the Rings a long time ago and liked the cartoon and the movies and things like that, the whole trip is about the journey, pretty much. Let's be honest.
Exactly.
Modern, younger generations want their scroll of teleport to and things like that. Is it possibly one of these older gamer versus younger gamer, and the expectation of video games that have brought this kind of fast travel idea? Because, I mean, let's be honest, I didn't hear of fast travel until video games and recent-er video games.
I mean, that may be a valid point.
Because it feels like they're not as interested in the journey. They want to get to the thing and do the task.
I think it's more the narrative nature, maybe, of it. I think that a lot of gamers now are really into that kind of the story, the narrative, as opposed to the more open exploration. And with that, I think they're going to look at travel as, if it's not leading you forward on the narrative, then why am I doing it? Sort of thing, which I don't necessarily means that they don't want travel, but I think travel is like, hey, you're just going to take weeks to kind of wander around, and that may not have to do with what they feel like the story is. And if the story is like Lord of the Rings in moving from place to place and doing that, I think that they would probably be fine with it. I think that maybe more where they would get into it is just, you're going to spend a week kind of diddling around to get to Waterdeep, where the next part is, and it really makes no difference. Nothing interesting is really going to happen as far as the story goes. You're just going to be kind of hitting random encounters, this or that. And I think some people would say, well, then why am I doing it? Let's just get on to Waterdeep and get on to the next story bit.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. But then it also kind of falls on the DM's part for that, of making the filler, as the chat is putting in there, as exciting, or just at least exciting in and of itself, so that you don't have the Clerks 2 montage of, as we have referenced, the Lord of the Rings, of what are we doing in the first movie? Bunch of guys walking. What are we doing in the second movie? Less guys walking. What are we doing in the third movie? 2 guys walking. And then he gets to the end, drops a ring in, bam. Bob's your uncle. If you have something to do, even if you don't have anything planned and laid out, that's what can make it meaningful. Because then you're going off of the cues of the players. What are you looking for? What do you think is out here? And then you just throw some random stuff together for what they hear.
Well, see, and I think it also depends on the players and the type of... So I tend to run very long, epic things, and I don't always want the main point to be some type of huge battle. And one of the tables I have, they kind of get roped into helping out this village that, like, literally they started playfully referring to as the village of, oh no, now what the fuck? Like, every time they turn around, there's some issue that this village, like, they start out with like 12 issues that half of them are red herrings that aren't even really issues. But some of them are actually what some players might consider dull and boring. Things like the village has got a lot of repair problems. Like, huts have fallen on the wayside because they need help. And I think some players would look at that and be like, I'm not going to sit around and fix huts today, right? Not that we took long to discuss that. It's like, okay, today we fixed huts. Okay, cool. What are we doing tomorrow, right? It didn't take up a lot of in-game time. It was just something that they did to help this village. Other people might be like, well, that's dumb, and I just want to go kill the griffin.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, but for the players at that table, okay, this is what needs doing. We're going to, and sometimes they would split off and be like, okay, we're going to go handle this thing over here. You guys work on that, you know. But I don't know. I just feel like a lot of them seem to want this and go to the next fight scene and go to the next fight scene.
Is it like the instant gratification factor?
I think so, but I'm seeing it a lot, and I hate being this way because it makes me sound old and like I don't like newer players. Because a lot of newer players, if you introduce it, I think well, can kind of be brought off of that mentality, which I feel like is a very modern video game mentality. I mean, it almost leads back to the old school, like anybody play Munchkin, you know,
Yep.
the card game? Kick in the door, kill the monster, take the loot. Great, what are we doing next? We're going to kick in a door, kill the... But it feels like they just want to go from fight scene to loot to fight scene to loot. And it's like, okay, but how are you getting character development if you don't have, quote unquote, the journey? Like that downtime, that journey, that walking is when you learn about your character and the other characters and how they interact with each other.
Well, it's also how you grow, not only as
Right.
your character, as the party, but how you end up expanding what your character and what all the party can do. So that at the same time, you can grow to be more than what you initially had without necessarily having to rely solely, exclusively, or in part on combat. The party grows as well because if it takes a certain amount of time to learn a particular skill or to learn a particular language, you're not going to get it done all at once. Looking at the amount of time is somewhat disheartening to some players. But if you then break it down and say, okay, it's going to take you 2 weeks to travel from Kalimport to Waterdeep, then that's 2 weeks out of 6 months to learn a language. If that 2-week journey ends up becoming a 2-month journey, congratulations, you have found untold wealth, fame, and fortune beyond just materialistic things. You've also shaved off 1/3 of the time it takes you to learn a language that you didn't already know, and you already have a built-in teacher in another party member. So then you no longer have to rely exclusively on one person in the party to do that thing. Be it languages, be it thieving, be it pickpocketing or picking locks, doing ritual spells, animal handling, tracking, finding food in the wild, whatever. These things can be taught, but they take time.
Right.
But if you're willing to do it, it's not so much a hand wave as like you did with, building huts for a day. It takes less than a minute, maybe two, couple of minutes at most, depending on
Right.
how much everyone wants to do in the game session. And then you're on and you're continuing to travel, you're continuing the journey. And occasionally you might have a random encounter, or you might find something that wasn't initially there on the maps that you gave the players for a crypt, a dungeon, a castle. Maybe some wayward backwater lord has land out there that you came across, and now you can maybe bring them into the fold, or possibly pick up a title and some land. Who knows?
Well, I
I
mean, that's
agree.
it.
It has to be a benefit to the journey, rather than just random encounter, hex crawling, roll dice, and that play style. If you like that, that's perfectly fine. But if you wanted like a narrative thing, I think there should be beneficial and negative things as well along the journey's way.
Well, and I mean, I think it should just go without saying for any part of the conversation, previous or after, you play how you want to play and you find people who like that play style. I'm a very narrative driven play style. And so they go through this village, and I mean, there's all these problems, right? And at the very end, the villagers basically see them as saviors and totally bring them in loop. And it turns out that they have a ruby mine under the village. That's a secret. So they now have basically access to these rubies in case they need money for something severe. Which it turned out they eventually did, as somebody else was poisoned and they needed to buy some expensive stuff. But So I mean, I don't want to say that was the cookie at the end of the thing, but I do believe in treating players when they put the time and effort in and they do stuff. But they also did so much more. They made friends with certain NPCs that have given them help. They've done so many things, and that's the problem with this cut scene, as Andrew put it, or the video game fast travel, is they're missing this entire wonderful thing where you can make friends with NPCs and find new places and learn skill sets and learn about each other's characters and grow your own character.
I mean, one of the most memorable gaming moments I had no intentions on doing, but it happened anyway, is level 1, Displacer Beast came, killed one of the players. One of the other players was a druid. They took him to the druid enclave, but he got excommunicated. They were able to raise the dead player back from the dead. But that was the consequence for doing that. And those two players had a lifelong bond after that. And that's nothing I could have planned for. That wasn't the adventure I was planning on running, but that's what happened because of the journey aspect.
I think one thing that to keep in mind is that the mechanics of the game have shifted over time to a more fast pace. So you go from suggestions on how much, I think in the first edition DMG, about training times and the travel and all that, to basically you kind of magically level up wherever you are and gain access to new spells wherever you go. And the de-emphasis on things like hex crawling type travel in favor of just sort of moving quickly there, where the pace of the game has sort of increasingly been quickened. And I don't know if it's a chicken or the egg thing, which came first, a survey of what players want that they want to keep on the move, or if the mechanics were trying to sort of streamline everything and that made it. But there's a lot of things that sort of push the game to keep moving. To now, I think when you're with sort of the 5th edition or sort of the modern game, is you have to be deliberately looking or talking to your table and everything about, hey, I want to slow that pace back down to get some of the things that you mentioned. Because I think when you have this sort of slower pace, that brings in a lot of these opportunities. So if the example of learning a new language, if you're going to spend 2 weeks on the road and you're actually going to play that out in some fashion and not just, wink and pass to the next destination, that then, what can I do with those 2 weeks? I can learn a language. If you know that you have to sit in this village for a week because someone is injured, they need to recover, then it makes sense that, I can use this time to train up and do something. So they kind of built in those gaps in time, and then you could fill those gaps with activities. But when the game has been reducing or eliminating out of those gaps, now you have to make that effort and bring everybody on board to try to put those gaps back in if you want them.
You're absolutely right, Todd. I mean, I'm looking at the 5e and the rest system. That's meant to keep going. That it's built in there to keep whatever the main activity is, to keep that going along. There's very limited go back to town mentality because we got hit a couple times and our resources, which are hit points in this case, are down, or spell slots are down, kind of deal.
Actually, it's there, and it's still there. You could just go longer without having to initially go back to town every couple of times.
Right.
The main thing, especially with 5e, is the fact of, I can't necessarily answer the chicken and the egg part, but to the rest of it, is they have become less mechanic heavy on the rest of the game beyond the combat, because from there it's really loose terminology and loose jargon for the DM to create whatever they want. And here's all the different tools to create whatever framework you want for your vision, design, and playstyle. And from there, it's up to and on you. And the only thing you really need from the books is, what type of monster is it? How hard is it? How hard does it hit? What kind of HP does it have? And stuff like that. And how to build a basic encounter. Everything else is still laid out in the same book. It just doesn't have do step 1, do step 2, do step 3, do step 4, and voila, you now have a 1 week to 1 month journey game plan laid out for you. You actually have to go through and do it yourself. What feels right? What works? What doesn't? Is it going too slow? Okay, let's find ways to speed it up. Is it going too fast? Okay, let's find ways to slow it down a little bit without completely hitting the brakes and slamming the e-brake. But that's almost entirely and exclusively on the DM. And that's not only on the DM for knowing it, it's on the DM for being able to react to changes at the table by the players in the game session. So if they're moving slower and you want it to go faster, you have to find a compromise. If they're going faster and you want the game to go a little bit slower because now they're outpacing everything you've already laid out or you have laid out, again, you have to find that compromise without, rocks fall, everyone dies, or Tiamat swoops down out of the sky, roll for initiative, or you get slapped into the plane of elemental water and now you're swimming in a, couple mile deep body of water.
So in the chat, there's an interesting discussion going on. And I want to bring it into the conversation. So yes, what I'm talking about is that the actions and the side stuff and everything that you do in that journey time, pretty much, in that kind of downtime, is kind of the point of being in an immersive world. So thank you for that. You're correct that that's what I'm talking about. The other point that's being brought up is that, and I'm going to read it so that I don't misquote Blue Griffin. As a DM, I put a lot of time and effort in working on the main campaign. If the party decides to chase every rumor they hear that sounds interesting, it slows the game down as I scramble to do things off the cuff and make it as part of the cohesive whole. And I think that this is just a kind of a table DM GM style issue. If they want to chase things, I totally will let them chase any rumor they want. They can go all over the place. I just don't stop what's happening. If they were supposed to go someplace and stop the madman from blowing up the tower, and instead they decide to go and chase a rumor, I'm not playing a video game where this other thing pauses till you get back to it.
Nope, real world still goes on.
Guess what? The tower blew up. So instead of stopping it and saving those people, now you have to deal with the fact that you didn't. You can still chase the rumor. You have to have a certain amount of time management. But I think that that's just a GM play style. And there's nothing wrong with doing it the other way as long as your players and your table are happy. Does that make sense? So I thought maybe we get your guys' opinions on that.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
I completely agree with you, Andy. I mean, it's a real world. It's a living world. It's called a living world because things keep moving and the passage of time keeps going as you are doing stuff. Whether you are traveling, whether you're adventuring, whether you're hex crawling or dungeon delving or being in noble society and going to balls and feats, everything else in the world is still going on. So because your party sat there and helped out a Timbuktu village and did everything and spent the time and spent the energy building it up, rebuilding it, and securing it, they were able to gain access to something that they didn't even know was there, and the NPCs and the villagers there kind of kept pretty well hidden from them, which was a ruby mine. Whereas if they never did it, and they in turn just, okay, let's build some huts for a couple of days or a week or whatever, and then we're on the road again. They never came back to that village. That village then continues to prosper at a slower rate without the player's help. Months later in game time, they come back. This Timbuktu village is now going to whatever ruling body in the area there is and saying, we would like to bankroll your whole operation, and now they are a major player in the overall scheme of your world, and they came out of nowhere. And now the players have to go to these people on bended knee rather than the reverse because the players kind of ignored them. So it's not a direct consequence. It's if you had stayed and helped, this would have been easier for you. Because you left and you didn't help, it's slightly harder, but still not impossible. Same goes with villains. If you decide to let a random cut purse go because you want to go after the main adventure or the main plot, that random cut purse could end up the head of the Thieves Guild, which could end up the head of whatever world assassins organization you may or may not have, or one could be created. And then a guy that you could have easily tackled at lower levels is now a big hombre with hundreds of NPCs at his disposal.
And let's be honest, as GMs, we love when that happens.
Yes.
Created a new big bad guy for me. Thank you, players. Cookies.
Exactly.
Like,
That's pretty much how I don't intentionally design, but that is the general design of my games, is anything that you don't pick up and you don't initially do or see or find or interact with slowly builds and grows or shrinks and goes away as you move forward in the game.
Right, and we keep using the word consequences. I just want to let everybody know there are good consequences for sometimes going left. Maybe that thing you did tells you about a secret entrance to the place you were heading to that you didn't know about as like a reward kind of thing as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's good and bad.
oh, absolutely.
Sorry, go ahead.
Consequences don't have to be negative. And actually, they should not always be negative. I mean, if every time they try something different or new or experimental, if you shut them down, you ruin that creativity. So you should always, in my opinion, try to give good consequences when you can.
Or at least have a benefit. Even if there's a detriment in there, have a benefit for what they did.
What were you saying? Go ahead, mate. Sorry.
No. What's up, Todd?
Oh, no, I was just gonna because the chat was going on about sort of fast travel and if there's timing is involved and sort of how do you do with structuring things if you have an important quest that they need to get to in a time limit, does that force players to then want to fast travel even more because there's this time crunch, they have to get to a certain spot. I was just going to mention that I guess there's different kinds of fast travel. There's like, I need to take the fastest route possible. And then there's we're just going to hand wave travel and go. And you can have the former without necessarily doing the latter.
You can. I mean, it's kind of very dependent on the world and how you have things set up. So the one table who had the whole village of what the heck, they finally got to the destination that they were actually heading for. And of course, there's problems, including one of the characters' sister happens to be there and she gets poisoned. Well, they kind of dicked around to the left. They really did. And then it's like, oh, I guess we should go deal with that. And I'm like, yeah, you have 3 days left and she's dead because you dicked around for 4 days. And they're like, well, freak, what are we going to do? And they finally start putting in the time and effort to try to fix this, but they're pretty much out of time. So they actually had to create some way to try to slow the poison down. I will tell you right now, a lot of GMs may not have let this one go. They worked their asses off to start basically, and it's the craziest idea, and it would never really work in the real world, but it was such an interesting idea, I let it go. They had water elementals, and they made mini ones to go into like the bloodstream and try to basically, how to put this, like there'd be more liquids so that the poison wouldn't be as concentrated.
Dilute.
And they had to they tried to dilute the poison kind of to try to keep her alive longer. And basically everything that could cast the spell had to spend 8-hour shifts with this woman trying to keep her alive. And they had to find somebody who spoke water elemental language because, well, how else would you explain to them what you want them to do? Because this isn't normal, like point at and go kick that type of thing, right? This was much more complex. But I allowed them to do this to create a little bit more time because it was such an interesting outside the box idea. So sometimes the point is that they're in a time crunch and they have to make a decision and deal with it or come up with some creative way of curtailing the time issue. I think for me, anyhow, I love it.
There's always the concept that they hear a rumor, they like it. They don't have time to get it right now, but they'll get it on the next trip or on the way back. And there's also a prep
Abs-
element too. I think if you're used to prepping a grand campaign linearly and you're going to prep way far in advance, then it's going to make, it's going to be a little bit less agile if you're trying to then bounce these other rumors, which may mean that you don't want to put rumors in there in the first place, which then may result in, players feeling confined or not, depending on the table. I like to try to plan very little ahead linearly and kind of wait to see what my players do. And for me, I love it when the players grab onto something and they want to go explore it, because to me that shows that they're interested in the world and they're intrigued by it and they want to explore it. So that's kind of how I game plan. My best hope is that I can outline the players arriving to a place to give them some options and that they're interested enough to really be thinking about it and not be thinking about where they feel like my next plot step is. Because usually I don't. I just have kind of stuff happening in the world and I wait to see what engages them. And then as they push forward on that, I try to build the next rung of the ladder, the next step ahead of them as they go. And so then if they decide to go another direction, then I just start another path in another direction.
All right.
Todd and I could GM together. Like, we're very on the same page.
It'll be
But I
like
think
Hall and Oates, but without the great music.
Exactly. Okay, so I think Pex was also poking us. We need to go to what materials do you use for prepping your games and running them? What works and what doesn't? Who wants to start?
I'll start with one because I think it's maybe a little bit off kilter, but I actually like the Mythic GM emulator. I use that quite a bit. And what I like about it is I like to generate, obviously as someone who loves old school games, and I think a lot of people love tables and all kinds of random stuff. But what I like about Mythic, and I think other GM emulators do similar things, is you can ask them, you can just ask them just crazy questions you may not know the answer to and kind of get like the yes or no and go with it. You can also get these sort of inspirational statements or imaginative statements about what may be happening. So often I'll have sort of world events. They're not really events, they're just things that happens. And I'll roll up in Mythic and I'll get something like, this pertains to an NPC that's the characters know, something bad happens to it, and it has to do with some kind of connection. And then I will take that, and then that will be this sort of, could be a twist, could be something, obviously, so usually something that's kind of off camera, so to speak. But then that becomes something that I will use to build, like, which NPC was it? And I'll pick somebody. What happened? And I can kind of use those things. Okay, it has connection and it has something else. Okay, let me figure out what might have happened to this person. And then that will help me sort of push the world in new directions. And I think I like it in particular because it pushes it in directions I'm not expecting. It's something that I have to think about and be creative about, and it's not something that I had sort of in my pack. I had to pull it out and create it on the fly with this inspiration. So that's something that I use a lot.
We dropped some links in the chat. Is that what you're referring to?
I believe so, but I'll click on the link. Yep.
I'm going to look at it because Todd mentioned it, because I've never seen it, which isn't, it happens.
There's so much stuff out there.
Oh, God, yeah.
Nobody can read it all.
How about you, Pex?
Let's see, what materials do you use for prep? Basically, I like my random encounters, so I look at that and I try to align them to the terrain of the area. And I run a lot of pre-made, so I look at the pre-made list of random encounters and I pull stuff out that is just garbage mainly, and I try to put things in that either the players haven't seen before or adds to the story going on at the time. Like if there's like a weather element that's a big part of the story, I may put things that are aligned with the weather rather. And that was fun to say. Anyway, and some other things I do is I kind of, like backseat to what Todd was saying, I just kind of wait for the players to do what they're going to do and adjust for that as well. So they help me prep for the next sessions, which is worth its weight in gold, in my opinion. What other things do I use? As far as physical materials, I use tons of note cards and stickies. I can't get enough of them. I have a problem. I have them color-coded. I even have them rubber band color-coded on top of the original color coding because I'm that OCD about it. I just find having tools at hand that I can grab quickly, anything that saves me time to scramble when something comes up randomly, is best, in my opinion.
Sweet. How about you, Mage?
I have slowly but surely over the last, I don't know, 10 years or so, started to move digitally, but I'm still a Luddite at heart, so the vast majority of everything I have and use for a game is all analog. So I have a DM's little Filofax that for when I run games, and I have another Filofax for when I'm a player, and it's just copious amounts of notes. For tools, there's one that I've used randomly when I just want something out of the box or something that I haven't seen before. Are the two that I linked in there. One is Donjon, which does random generations for just about any topic you can think of, and for when I am stalling with a given language that I know, fantasy name generator. That does it not only for names of people, but places, things, objects, shops, items, random miscellanea items in like a general store, or a menu item on a given tavern or innkeep or restaurant. Lazy DM's Guide by Mike Shea or Sly Flourish and Return to Lazy DM. Book of Adventure Design by the Frogs. And then pretty much I just hit all the old books and notes that I've taken out of them. I pretty much have 2 copies of most of the books. One is tagged to All Holy Hell with post-its and stickies over the decades, and the other is a clean version that I lend out to people, so that I have all of my notes in a given part, and anything new I come up with, I slap a new sticky on there, and I have notes somewhere. Highlighters, index cards. Biggest one in the last 3 years that's helped me is a magic item template spreadsheet, to where I just plug and chug the details and then print it out, and then they will all fit either as is on a 3x5 card, or if it's got a lot of flavor text and mechanical parts, it'll fit on a 5x7, either horizontally or vertically. And then I just, cut, glue, bam, hand that to the player. That gets put in their little sleeve with their character sheet, and then that's why I pass out at the beginning of every game session and have it passed back to me at the end of every game session.
Okay, let's see. Things I use, because it's changed a lot in the last 2.5 decades.
Have we moved forward from pictographs on stone, or is that still a thing?
No, it is still a thing for me. And if you've ever seen one of my maps, it still seriously looks like a 5-year-old got a box of crayons and played. However, I keep being told there's these awesome online things where they will help you make a map that doesn't look like a 5-year-old had a box of freaking crayons. I used to have all these elaborate plot ideas, and I'd write them all out, and with flow chart type of things. If they do this, if they do that, and what I quickly caught on to is that having all of this prep time in was wasted, because they never do anything that you think of. They're always, sometimes they do, but and then you get better at kind of getting an idea of what your table's going to do, and so you start kind of pigeoning it down to, okay, they're never going to take that, they're going to do this type of thing. And then they still come up with stuff that didn't work. And so I tried to change my style, and I've changed and evolved. And one point, and I really love it, and I used to loan it to people if they were starting out, is the note cards, which I think is a fabulous system. And I still do, especially for certain types of GMs. Basically, you color code them. So monsters might be white cards. So anything you want to know about a particular monster, like what book it's out of, stats, that type of thing, you would write on a card. And you don't sit there and just like copy it out of the book every day. You basically build your cards as you're going along. And then your NPCs have a card with maybe stats, maybe notes, anything you want to put there. Objects can have cards. Player characters have cards. And one of the great things with that card system is like you never miss somebody in your initiative because you just put the cards in the order and you go card, card, card. And I mean, like I had, we'll just say, a lot of cards built up because I did that system for quite a while and I really loved it. At this point, the most important tool for me, outside of things like the name generator and the tavern generators and those, which I totally still use to this day. And sometimes I'll even just go on and play around and print off a list of 10 names. I'm like, these are cool names. And I'll just throw it in my notes in case I need a name on the fly. But the most important tool as a GM for prepping is actually the notes I take on the previous sessions. Which sounds like a kind of, well, of course, but no, really seriously. Those notes tell me what they were interested in. Those notes tell me where they were headed. So it tells me all of the things that I need to kind of set up for the next game. You know, and I can flag notes and be like, okay, they didn't finish this. This is possibly a big bad later. Or they were really interested in this, but they didn't have the time. How is that advancing while they're doing whatever else so they can go back? Does that, you guys get what I'm saying? And I found that for me especially, and all of the players went and did what, which I seem to have at tables, which I love. I really do. This helps me the most because I have some ideas of what they're wanting, what they're doing, rather than trying to do a lot of elaborate planning. I don't want to spend my time thinking about something that they never explore or trying to railroad them into exploring something that they have no interest in.
Oh no, that's like the beginning of all of my prep is everything that I jotted down shorthand in the previous game session.
Yeah.
Not only the choices they made, but stuff that they said like offhandedly. Because I try to, when I first start a game, I keep it really loose and easygoing, even for veteran players and friends of mine I've gamed with for the better part of 20 years in a couple of cases. And then as the game goes forward, it starts to get not so much like tighter and stricter, but gets better into the flow. So when I'm hurrying them up, I don't necessarily have to be like, okay, kids, stop fucking around. Let's like get back to the dice rolling and game playing. Most of that just comes into the basic rule of if you're at the table and we're all sitting down, then you're in character. Anything you say at the table is in character. So if you tell the DM to go fuck himself, you just told whatever chief NPC the party is talking to go fuck himself. Congratulations. What happens next is beautiful and all on you, buddy.
I don't do that. What I have found is that allowing them that out of character and listening to it allows me to have insight into what they want and what they're doing, because they'll talk to each other and then it's like, oh, okay, so that's what we're looking at, right? Also, I love it, but a lot of times that group mind is so much smarter than me because they'll discuss their theories on stuff, right? Oh, it's really this thing over here. And I will say there has been many, many a time where I'm like, well, shit, it is now. Fuck, that's so much better than what I wrote down. Be like, write a note.
The urban legends the players create at the table are the creations and the genesis of future monsters, encounters, and plots that we may come up with given enough time and a random set of choices and circumstances, but just off the fly, off the cuff, nah, not really.
I just dropped a couple links in chat there. A storybook I love. I use it constantly for crap I don't know things about, like herbs. I don't know anything about plants, so I just click on some things, get some quick info. For example, I generated a couple things. Antnar causes fevers, dog roads, prevents scurvy. It just helps me for the little things I'm not really knowledgeable at myself.
I'm going to be checking that one out. I do not know anything about plants. We've discussed that. And so that would be good. And I need to be more tech friendly. I'm not great at tech stuff. So.
And the other one I put in there is good for puzzles and descriptions as well, Strollins.
Awesome. See, I learned so much when I come hang out with you guys. But yeah, I've had players come up with stuff and I'm just like, yep, just scratch what I thought that was. This is what it is now. But I love that. I love when they're so engaged that they're discussing it and things like that. And I am perfectly willing to realize that somebody else had a better plan than mine.
Yeah.
And as long as I can make it work in the world and what we've done so far, all right. The trick has always been is making them think that as a player that they figured it out.
It's their idea the entire time. You had nothing to do with it.
Well, no. It's the real trick is so that they think you're a good GM is that making them think that they figured out your grand evil scheme the whole time. Like, not that you switched and took their idea. No. It was really my plan the whole time. Like, that is a life lesson.
Oh, no, that's like the first rule of DMing is it's two parts. One, never let the players see your sweat. Two, it's always part of the plan.
Right.
Even if you threw out the plan 5 seconds into saying, all right, game on, doesn't matter. It's still all part of the plan. Everything that happened was meant to happen, and it happened the exact way that it was supposed to happen.
Exactly. That's it. Okay.
And the more you believe it and tell yourself that, the higher the chance of your players never ever knowing we had no plan.
You know that whole, what is it, fake it till you make it type of thing? That's half of GMing. Just pretend like you know what's going on.
Dazzle them with brilliance or baffle them with bullshit.
Yep. I used to tell people, when I would explain what GMing is, I'm like, well, if you really want to know what GMing is, it's the art of bullshit and herding cats. That's it. That's what we're doing. Bullshit and herding cats.
And I'd like to welcome Frank to the show.
Hey, hi, Frank.
Hey, sorry I'm late. I got the time zones mixed up, and I thought, I've got 20 minutes until we're starting.
U.S. time zones, fuckery. No worries.
Do you want to jump in on the last topic, or do we need to move on to the next one, Pex?
Well, let him jump in.
Okay.
We started a little late anyway, so we can go a little over.
Okay, so, okay.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out the wording on it again.
Prep.
But yeah, what he said.
Sorry, I've got something set up wrong at the moment on my end. Can you give me 2 seconds and I'll get back to you?
Sure. Todd, I don't think you said anything on this one. Or I was out.
On the tools?
Yeah.
Well, I mentioned Mythic. That was
that's right. You were the first one up. That's right.
Yeah, and there are other ones in there. I think there's some that Mythic, I think, is worth the price for anyway for the use I've gotten out of. I know there are other ones. If you probably search online, you can find some that are free. I guess the thing that I like about them is that using their prompts for sort of what's happening can kind of keep the world fresh, not just for the players, but for you as a GM, because a lot of times you get sort of tunnel vision over your plans within plans within plans. And then if you use something like this at intervals, then they can potentially throw monkey works on those plans. If they say something, this NPC rolled for an NPC, they died or something horrible happened to them, and that was a major plot point coming up for you, then suddenly you have to scramble and figure out, well, what happened? How did this happen to them? Who benefits? Who hurts? How does that give? How the swerve works? And I really like that stuff because I think everything gets stale when I know exactly what's going to happen. And those kind of tools, where if you take them and you use them honestly and you really go and work through what they're giving you, allow you to keep everything fresh and just keep it fresh for the players. They make you use your imagination to see what's going on. And it really gives the world, I feel like, a dynamism because even you don't know necessarily what's going to happen from week to week.
Yeah, so I'm back now. I had the wrong key set up for push to talk, and it was just giving me greater than signs into the chat all the time, and that was unmanageable. So regarding prep, I would like to second what Andy said about the notes from the previous session. That is something I often do not do enough, and when I do it, I always really grateful to myself for having been a good boy last week and actually having written some notes. Super helpful. But the other things that I use is if I'm planning on using a particular monster or something like that in an upcoming session, I will often flick through various monster manuals from different systems just to see how they tackled things and see if one of them has a particularly flavorful approach to or twist on that monster, so that I can incorporate that. I always find that quite interesting. I find the 13th Age Bestiary is quite fun for that. They have a lot of interesting things, but also a variety of other ones like the Lamentations of Flame Princess, bits and bobs. And just in general, also, I flick through a lot of adventures. Even if I never plan on running them, I'll just flick through them and I will gut them for what they have. Like, I like that idea, or I really like that location. I will take those bits and then stick it all together. And I use OneNote, but any old notebook will do the trick. That's pretty much it when it comes to materials. So in short, I use everything I've got on my shelf and flick through it at random and see what comes up.
All right, who wants to pick out our next one here?
So I take it I missed the discussion that I pulled.
We started with yours, yeah.
Yeah, great.
Good times.
It was a really good one, and we all liked that one.
Yeah, we talked about it for a really long time, and it was really fun. We really liked it.
Oh no!
Thanks, Frank.
Yeah, no worries.
I think Frank should pick the next one. Yeah,
let's let Frank pick the next topic here.
Okay, yeah. Well, let's just grab the first one from the list there. Spell buffs and debuffs. Best and worst uses in game. It's an interesting one. I don't have an immediate answer. When it comes to spells these days, and when I say these days, I'm saying that with 25 years of gaming or whatever under the belt. I like spells that are quite freeform, rather than providing numerical sort of little bits here and that lead to a lot of maths. Not that I've got a problem with maths at the table, but I do find that a lot of players that some players aren't as up on the quick maths as others, and then they get shy about that, and that's no good, and no one's having fun with that. So yeah, I like natural language things. So best buffs. Yeah, so I've picked a topic, but I've got nothing immediate to say about it. I'll see if I can think of an example while someone else takes an over for a bit.
Players love haste.
Everybody loves haste.
Everybody loves
Players hate haste when the DM uses it for the NPC.
Mm-hmm.
Players also hate charm person and dominate mind, or dominate person.
And the charm spells.
Pretty much, because
does that count as a buff?
Well, I mean, it's a buff for the NPC, but it's a debuff for the player. Because essentially, if you cast a spell and the player fails to save, then you now control the player. How they have changed it and caveated it slightly going through the additions is now it takes the NPC's full action to, if you want to do all of the bells and whistles that a PC has. So if you want to set it on autopilot and just say, attack those mooks in front of me, it will just do basic attacks on its turn. But if you want to use the bells and whistles of, maybe it has a radius attack to where it'll run in and everything within 2 squares of it will get hit, but it has to spend some type of disposable resource to do it. The NPC controlling the PC has to spend their action to do it. So the NPC does nothing that round, really.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense from an action economy point of view.
Well, the other thing they did is they nerfed the amount of time it lasts, because way back at the beginning, charm person could last for months, weeks, months, not 5 minutes, whatever it is now.
I just had one come up in my game, and I play an older system here. The they got a tag-along little hireling for a month now because he failed to save. He is literally their bitch boy for another 28 days, in-game days.
Yeah, Geese is the one that they dropped with that now, Todd, to where Geese is the one that as you drop it in a higher level spell slot, it lasts exponentially longer for each slot after a given point. To where at ninth, if you drop it in a 9th level slot, it'll last for a year and a day. So you can make the king of a kingdom dance a jig for a year and a day. And after a year and a day, they will then know that the jig is up and that you did it.
Oh, that was a good use of the jig is up.
Good times here in the tavern. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, is it pronounced geese? I always went geese, but I've always seen the word written. But I think
I do either or. So you're good. Keep going.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say, I think with that one, what mitigates that one a little bit for me is that I think you're not controlling them moment to moment. That's more of you're giving them a quest, right, or an objective, and they get to kind of do it how they want. So I don't know if that one gets as much hate because basically it's just like being given a forced quest. Whereas Charm is, you're essentially being told moment to moment what you have to do.
Yes, but in a smaller moment.
It's a smaller moment. The other thing is that with Gaius, whatever we're calling it, is that the quest can be something like you can't leave town until the murderer is caught. So
a meteorite lands before your feet in the center of town.
Exactly. So it's one of those, it depends on how you use it, how much they hate you for it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to just drop it because it's probably the most devastating one on either side. Wish spells.
No, not really. I've always loved it. I still use it. I still allow players to use it.
If anything, I find the wish spell to be a little boring.
Yeah.
Because it's got some very specific options listed, and then this sort of quite wishy-washy or maybe something similar at the end tagged in, and it should be much more. It should be a thump, something you thump down, and it will be world-changing and fun and useful. But someone gaining some stats and stuff is a little boring.
Really, my players have the fear of God in them when it comes to wish spells, but maybe that's because I'm a bastard.
Wording is very important.
Exactly.
I'm very critical on the way they word the spells. That may be the difference here.
As my brother loves to put it with the wish spell, if you blow the wish spell and you wish for all the gold in the treasury in the kingdom, and that's your wish, and you worded it just like that, congratulations. Your hut hovel building that you are currently in now contains the entirety of the kingdom's treasury. Now that the treasury is emptied, the guards on duty have spotted it, called an alert, the entire kingdom is scrambled, and oh look, there is a building in town that is bursting to the seams with gold, jewels, artifacts, treasures, arms, armor, anything and everything that was in the treasury, and you're standing on top of it like Scrooge McDuck. I wonder who did it.
And then it bursts. And then the town is overrun with all of the gold in one place.
Pretty much. Then you have the real genius moment of the popcorn house.
Yeah, that's fun. Although it does sound a bit like all your wishes are being granted by like conniving devils or genies and such, rather than a benevolent deity, perhaps, who will take you by the spirit rather than the letter of the word.
Absolutely.
I did have a great wish moment in a recent game, actually, if I may quickly. They found an item that gave them a wish in exchange for, but they have to give up their arms for a day and a year or something like that. So you get a wish, but your arms fall off. And one of the players dominated an NPC and told the NPC to wish for them to be even more powerful, as in the player's character and stuff, which I thought was a good use of that. Sadly, the other players were not impressed that this particular character had managed to bypass the bad part of the wish, but used it for something so selfish as that. And they end up, instead of rescuing them when they were in bad danger, to sort of look the other way. But hey, I thought it was fun.
One of mine was one of the players wished for some temporary healing item like a rod or something. Like, okay. But one of the caveats that they worded was it could never be stolen from the player. So, sure, it magically appeared, but hovered around them like an etalon, and it went clankety-clank with the narrow hallways, and monsters and whatever it could hear from, well, pretty much the entire dungeon, which caused great fun.
You are stealthy. The floating magical item around you is not.
Mm-hmm. It'll never leave you. It will die with you, but clankety-clank through the dungeon you go.
Yeah, I think a lot of GMs, when it comes to Wish, can be djinn who have a sense of humor. But players who know this then put a lot of time and effort. Like I had a table once who spent an entire session writing out how they wanted this wish worded. And there's something really amazingly interesting about watching them try to figure out just the right wording. And they were so happy doing it because they thought that they had this down. And I gave it to them because, I mean, they spent so much time working on it, trying to make sure that they could not give me any wiggle room to fuck it up. Because if I have wiggle room, I'm going to fuck it up. I'm just saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Was that a fun session for you?
For me, it kind of wasn't. For them, it actually was. Like they sat there and they were hard at work on this. They were just, and I just sat there and got to watch them think their way through this, going, "Wow." Because I wasn't actually even planning on fucking them over on this one too bad. But damn, did they put a lot of time and effort into it.
Yeah, I've had that a few sessions. I had to put a time limit. I have a 10-minute stop time on, okay, we're done. What's your wish? But yeah, I've had like 2 or 3 sessions where it's the entire session long. They're trying to word it like a lawyer. It's great.
Oh yeah, it was great. But that table was very happy doing it, and I was like just enjoying the mayhem, I guess, or the overthinking maybe. But yeah,
I love the overthinking. I love watching it happen.
I do. Okay, so let's see. Buffs. Hold person, charm person, dominate. Those are always good ones to have, but keep in mind that as a GM, I have access to. They really hate it when I do it.
It's rule 2 of the GMs. Everything you can do, the GM can do as well.
Sometimes better.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Not always, but sometimes. So I think
You've
I
got
mean, you
your
guys have kind of
standards,
covered most of it.
Protection from evil and stuff like that as well.
Yeah.
Detect evil. That's actually, or detect chaos or something like that. That's also a good one, especially in investigation.
No alignment. Great stuff.
The alignment one, but also was it Zone of Truth, whatever the fuck
Yeah.
they're calling it.
Yeah.
Especially in investigations or mysteries, that one's awesome.
I love the caveat that they made for 5e out. I can't remember, and I don't have the books anywhere near me for previous editions, to where Zone of Truth is up. You have to speak the truth. You do not actually have to speak the entire truth, and you can also still say mum. So you could say absolutely nothing the entire time Zone of Truth is up, and it's still telling the truth.
Mhm.
Well,
Or you can give a used car salesman's non-denial denial, and it's still the truth, because you haven't outright said no, that's not true.
Did you kill so and so? Well, I was at the grocery store that day. Technically, yes, I was at the grocery store before I killed them, but you don't have to say that part.
Yeah.
Which is, it's awesome.
I was in the room, and I did see them die.
I saw them die, yes. You know, which is also fun, especially if you're good at twisting things.
You've got to be a little careful that you're not sort of taking away or subverting all of the players' abilities and options that way.
Absolutely.
A bit frustrating. I find sort of detection spells a bit problematic because you either want them to find the fun and the adventure or you don't, and having someone have to spend resources in the form of spells or whatever is a little odd.
I always love throwing out a couple of different things when anyone drops a detection spell of any type, so that it slightly throws them off from whatever they're actually looking for, so they'll still find it, or the breadcrumb trail for the main point that they're looking for, but they'll also find a couple of different things that they might not have found if they didn't have that up. Mostly so that they'll continue to use the spell, not just for the sake of burning a spell slot and, just recurring resources, but to show that you do gain a benefit from doing this, even if it's small. Not everything is going to be huge and grand.
Yeah, that's nice.
I think I always like how players forget about a lot of the spells when they're doing dirt. So, they commit a murder or something and they conveniently forget that there are things like speak with dead or kind of spiritual things or other kinds of detections that people can do to find them, as if in a magic world, the fact that there might not have been any witnesses or they don't have fingerprints leaves them free and clear on any crime they could commit.
I had a game once for the first 2 years of it. The players completely forgot to use find object or locate object, so that every time I had a cut purse grab one of their coin purses in a market or in a city, they just let it go, and they would lose untold sums of money. And they had the spell, never used it. I'm like, one of the last times they did it, I was just like, you have a spell that'll help you find this person, right?
And
They're
they
like,
have that
"What?"
dough moment, right? Like, oh, what? Damn it.
Mm-hmm.
It's always fun. I don't know.
Personal investment in the game. Interesting topic. I mean, are we talking time? Are we talking energy? Are we talking how much you put forth and how much quantitative work could be said to have been done for a particular game?
Yeah, for example, I mean, I would say that I have quite a lot of personal investment in games, to the point when people don't show up or something like that, even though I am logically quite aware that we have lives and sometimes things clash, but it's always quite disappointing nevertheless. Yeah.
Okay, I think this one is sort of my fault type of thing. So it is. This was my topic. So there was a discussion in last week's, and don't get me wrong, I like the person and I thought it was a great discussion, but they were comparing tabletop RPGs to any other game like Monopoly. And the more I thought about it, the more I don't like that comparison. Monopoly, you pick a car, a hat, a thimble, who cares, right? You have no investment in your quote unquote character. You have no decision process really with your character. The dice says where you're going to go, and then, okay, I buy property or I don't have money, right? There's no real personal investment in your character, quote unquote, for Monopoly versus I picked its name, I've written its background, I know what it likes, what it doesn't like, what its goals are. I've played it for 2 years. The investment you have in that character is so much different. At the same time, the other person is absolutely correct in the fact that it is still just a game. As a GM, you kind of have to mitigate those two differences. It is a game, but you know that these people have, and some players have more investment, I think, emotionally than others. So I was wondering how everybody thought that gets handled and how they felt about it. Because I'm sure everyone here has also had people at the table who are more invested than others.
Absolutely.
So what do you think about it? How do you handle those who are more invested versus those who are a little bit more, it's a game mechanic? Or do you find that people are just so much more invested than that descriptor?
I love having players that become invested, not only initially and they want to find out more and do more in the game, but players that also become invested in the world I created and how they have expanded it, not only with what they have done, but with what they have done with their characters. Not just the first one they made, but the 100th one they've made. I mean, one of the main things I like doing, and I still do, granted, I haven't done it lately, but that's mostly due to traveling, is I give players a general world map or a general regional map of wherever they're going to start in my games. And I tell them, here's where you're at, here's the world. You can make your character from anywhere in the world. If you don't see something you like, create it. And you can build an entire kingdom. You can just build a small farming community. You can build an entire mageocracy if you wanted to. And flesh it out as much as you want, and that's where your character came from. And I love seeing that, and I love seeing players that do that. And it doesn't give the player anything more than any other player at the table. It doesn't give the character anything more than any other character at the table. What it does do is it allows me to expand the world from what I originally had. And it allows me to drop hints and breadcrumbs and rumors and sideways news of here's what's going on in the rest of the world while the party is off doing whatever they're doing, and they come back to some place where they can hear the news. And that folds into, I want the players to give me ideas and items in which to torture and possibly kill their characters. Not outright, and not, oh, I once took a shit on the altar at the shrine of Asmodeus. No, I mean, he'll laugh and he'll smite you eventually, but you're not really on his radar. But do you have living family members? Do you have friends? Do you have comrades in arms? Do you have people in places that you care for and care about more than yourself and, the next day of adventuring and the next bag of gold? Okay, those are things I can then use in stories and plots and one-shots to take what you made as the player and put it into my general design of the game that you're playing in. And some of it's verbatim, some of it I have switched up, some of it I have completely done a 180 on. And they reap even more rewards from the game and become even more invested, because now it's not just what I've made for the game and what I give the players and they then make of it what they will. It's they are making stuff for the game and the world, and each different choice and item they add to the world adds a different layer to it, which then creates a splinter world that I then create and play in another game. Because what if the players did this instead of that? What if the players chose B rather than A? What if the player was a dwarf and came from this other continent rather than the place that they originally stated, but it had the same story? How would that play out there? And therein turns and lies NPC creations, world creation, story creation, demographics, geographics, and any tool really that a DM could use for a world. And the players all did it. I just end up putting the pieces together and reorganizing it to make it look like a complete puzzle.
It's interesting that you talk about investment in the world as well, because I was thinking along the same lines. I think many players are quite invested in their own characters, but where it really then starts to shine is when they become invested in the world to the point where their characters become living parts of that world, where where they match the tone of the world or the setting, for example, like even things like naming that character. So it's easy to sort of really lose touch with the tone of the campaign by giving your character a silly name or an anachronistic name. But when they really think about that, and also about the backgrounds, and they work that into the world, that's nice, and that's a type of investment that enriches the game for everyone.
I agree, and I love it. I love it when they come up with stuff to help with the world building. I think that that's awesome, and I think it helps to connect them too. I've had some players who we've been playing. I've had 2 and almost a third table that has gone and hit the decade point or farther. And I find that those characters are especially highly attached to those characters. Like the longer they play, the more attached they are, which is both a good and a bad because I don't like to kill players' characters if I don't need to. Like I can't stop you from doing something insane and getting your character killed. But I don't want a random dice roll to just do something horrible, right? But you still want that feeling for the characters that that's a thing. Like you're not omnipotent, you're not a god, you can still die.
Mhm.
And so I sometimes find that that's a complex juggle, and making them feel like that risk is still there while not necessarily killing the character that they've been growing and playing and having a great time with for a decade.
I try to soap it in somewhere towards the halfway point or so. So anywhere between 3 to 5 years. That this is not just a single character campaign in game. This is a generational game. And that generational game doesn't necessarily have to start or begin or end with this particular character. Any character that any player has ever made eventually is in one of my Codex of Souls for NPCs I've used over the years. But they can retire as well. They can choose to stop adventuring. They have seen enough, done enough, died enough, met enough gods, demigods, quasi-extraplanar beings, been to the various planes of existence, dined with kings, queens, and high priests of light and dark beings, deities, and other fantastical creatures. And they just want to go farm or open up a general store or open up the one thing that every party dreads hearing at the beginning of an adventure. You start in a tavern, and it has warm beer, cheap food, and good music. And so they retire, and then they make a new character. Not everyone has to die in order to make something new. But then not everyone has to retire either. Juggling the death part is tricky, but that's when you have to come at it sideways. So that it's everything. It's not only everything that you see and hear and is tangible and you can react to, but now it's everything that you can't see and you don't know is coming that could come after you as well. And it starts easy in the lower levels and earlier on in the campaign when everything is fresh and new, so you're always on the lookout. And then you slowly become accustomed to your way of life, even with its ever-changing variables. You become accustomed to a certain level of danger. You as the DM then go through and throw in new environmental variables, poisons, plagues, political intrigue, monetary detriments. Not necessarily harder encounters, but encounters with creatures that have not been seen before or have only been talked about in rumors and legends. And they might carry things that haven't been seen in hundreds, thousands, or dozens of millennia. And so there is no known cure, and the magic you have stalls it, doesn't necessarily cure it. So now you've got to go on something else to find it or to cure it.
I do something a little bit weird in my games. It's sort of like a living world, but I keep the chance of death there. Rocks fall and you die is very much a thing that could happen. But to my point though is if their character dies, sure, it's dead. But I have it kind of come back in the standard tavern. It's what I use in every one of my games where you get your mercenaries and hirelings from, it comes back as a hireling or NPC. So you can rent out your old hero and stuff. So it's kind of like a living epitaph to that dead character, more or less. So it's, yes, it died, but it's not forever lost to time and your memories kind of deal. So it doesn't exterminate that sting of death, but it helps a little bit. I found just giving the players a little bit of a, I may see my guy again, or at least on the next adventure. I also have it where they can come in with a new character at whatever starting level for the adventure, or they can bring in their old character if it's within the level range of the adventure itself. But you bring it in, it could die just like anybody else. I'm not gonna curb around the chance of death just because it's an old favorite of your character, one of your old favorite characters that you're bringing back in. But that's just me though.
Should we
Any
move on to
thoughts,
the
Todd?
last topic?
I think so.
Let's go for it.
Someone remind me what it is.
GM
there we go.
scene setting and player curiosity and how those fit together.
Yeah, this one was mine, and I'll just explain a little bit what I was kind of getting at. So I've seen this on Reddit a couple times, and what you run into is, I guess, there are different ideas of what is the amount of information the GM should be providing versus what the players should be being curious about and discovering for themselves. I think one situation which came up on Reddit in a thread was, should a ranger, because of their knowledge of the wilderness, should the GM stop the ranger character from doing something that seems kind of obviously stupid because their ranger would know better? So I think the instance was they're in front of a cave and they had this crazy idea they were going to do something with oil, and so they need to render the oil, so they start cooking like deer meat right in front of this like dire bear cave, and of course the awful things happen because they're bringing out raw meat and cooking it in front of a bear cave. And in the discussion, there was a lot of people who felt like, hey, the GM should have stepped in and said, oh, well, you're a ranger, this is a bad idea, don't do it. And I think my opinion was, in the vast minority, I might have been the only one who said, as a player, you are the brain of this ranger. If you as a player think this is a good idea, then that's what your ranger thinks. And I'm not going to gainsay you because of, ranger class knowledge would, that maybe in the real world, a ranger would say, don't do that. And the kind of things that I compared it to, but I don't think anybody, at least in that thread, seemed to agree with me, was I don't tell a wizard what spells to prepare. Even though there are clearly some spells that are better than others or more appropriate, I don't tell them what to do. I don't tell a fighter, don't go run out and stand and let yourself get surrounded and beat on by a dozen enemies, because that's clearly a bad tactical decision. Even though in the fiction, a fighter would know not to do that. You decide to do that, you do that. And then there was the other kind of off-put of that, which was when you're setting the scene as the GM, like, what do you feel like is the appropriate amount of information that is enough for them players have to then be curious about and ask about, versus where that line is drawn, I guess, between when you feel like you've set the scene enough and now it's up to the players to take the information you've given them and then be curious and ask questions, versus if you're the the player side, hey, they haven't given me enough information, and sort of where do you think that is? I think, just to finish up with one last example, one person said, hey, if we're waiting for the carriage of a merchant and the GM is describing the scene and they describe a carriage coming up with a certain livery on it, but the GM knows that's not the livery of the merchant, it's actually the livery of a bad guy, but he doesn't tell us that, even though we should know, or at least from the player standpoint, we feel like we should know, then that GM's kind of doing us dirty. Versus maybe someone else who might think, hey, it's up to you, when the GM describes his livery, to ask the question, is this the livery of the person we're waiting for? Yes or no, and sort of act on there. So I kind of thought the topic of this concept of where where the line is drawn, how you figure out, as from the GM side setting the scene, and from the player side being curious, asking questions, and not maybe making assumptions before acting, or where you feel like that relationship is. So short story long, that's the topic.
Well, I like the topic.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. I think for me, when I go into those situations, the important decision, the marker for me is, am I trying to be malicious and actually sort of subverting the players rather than their characters? Do I feel like I want to lure them into a trap and just seem clever? So if that's the case, then I think I've miscommunicated the scene, versus still letting the players sort of get themselves into complicated situations and trouble, because that is also my job, as long as it's fun in that sense. But I never want the players to feel like I've just been pulling one over on them. So that's my marker.
Well, it's an interesting one because I'm gonna put this example in here, like knowledge local, and if you don't use a skill system, let's just say you're from that town. Um, are they going to know about the secret order that's in their town just because they're local, or how to get in there, or who to contact to see about that kind of stuff? If you're using a skill system, well, you can just roll for it. But if you're, for me, it's like, did you put anything in your backstory about that, or did you let me know beforehand, kind of deal, that you want to be part of like a secret order kind of deal, and then I can work that in on my own plans I already had, kind of situation. Or I've had players ask me, like back to our ranger example, what favorite enemy should I pick if I'm playing a game that has favorite enemy with the ranger? Well, I can't tell you that. Pick what you would like to kill is my basic response to that. It's your favorite enemy. But
yeah, I think for sure there's a difference. Sorry, go ahead, Pex. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, I'm just gonna wrap it up here. And they feel cheated if they pick something that doesn't ever appear in the game. But I'm gonna throw something in, whatever they pick, just to have it, so they don't feel that cheated aspect of it. But go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say there definitely is a difference between trying to create a gotcha moment, and I feel like some GMs, I think in their maybe less great moments, have, consciously or subconsciously avoided giving information, or have been obtuse deliberately to try to mislead or, cause players to make the wrong decisions or decisions because they don't have the most information to get the kind of situation they want. So I think there's definitely something, I think when I refer to this, I'm hoping that when GMs are doing this, they're doing it honestly and not because they're trying to elicit kind of this, haha, gotcha, you fell into my trap sort of thing. I think as a player, and maybe this is just because my background is almost entirely, from playing a lot of old school games coming forward, is, as a player, I feel like you always have to do your due diligence. If you're not sure and the GM didn't say this is definitely X, at least in the groups I've always played, we've always been like, well, do I know, does my character know this? Did we recognize it? Are we sure before we step forward? And maybe I'm just in that habit of always being like, if I'm not sure, I'm going to take steps to make sure I'm sure before I make a choice. Because I feel like in a lot of the things that I was reading on Reddit and different things, talking about situations, you can always see the point where the players make an assumption and they don't check that assumption. And I think it comes down to whether you feel like that as the GM that they've given you enough that you can make that next step and do it, or you feel like they're kind of hiding something from you. But I always feel like as a player, take that extra step and just ask the question, because one, doesn't do any harm to ask. And then two, I feel like if the GM then just jams me up and says, oh, this will happen instead, I can say, hey, I asked you, then I feel like it kind of exposes you were trying to gotcha me unfairly versus, say, an honest, straightforward situation.
Well, I've seen this on the players' end too. Well, they'll come up with a story along the lines, I'm a well-traveled character, I've been part of a caravan going from city to city, or a sailor going from port to port. I know everybody and everything about every city we're going to go to. Well, no, you don't. I'm sorry. You'll have some highlight details, maybe some vague details, but you're not going to have exacts unless you spend some quality time in said area. But again, my opinion.
Yeah, another part of this is also the type of trust you have between the player and the GM. If when I play, which doesn't happen very often, but when I do play, I will always sort of try and get my character into trouble, because I enjoy the complications and I enjoy the fun that comes from that. So from that regard, if to go back to Todd's example there about the cooking, rendering the fat in front of the cave, I might, as a player, think, oh wait, I might attract something from there. Yeah, let's go for it. I don't care, this is fun. But yeah, if you have a great GM that is a fan of the players, but will make them sweat for it and will make them work for it, I think that's great. And then you don't have to worry too much about it either, because either way, if everyone's just having fun regardless of the outcome, then it's a good game.
Yeah, for sure. I think what I always think about is if I was going to, and again, I didn't run this Ranger example, it may not even be a great one, but I think that the thing is afterwards, if I'm in a situation and the players make choices that maybe in my mind are silly, and I've had players make silly choices, even though they kind of know better, but sometimes you get invested into a solution. You go with it. Is after the game, if you can stop and say, here are the sequence of events, do you understand why they took place the way they did? If everyone goes like, yeah, I get it, then you're good. I think if there is a situation where you're doing that and you set it up, you say, here are the events and how they played out, and then there is a disconnect, and then you're in a situation where you think it makes sense, and they're in a situation when they don't think it makes sense, then that's where I feel like the trouble is. So for all this stuff, obviously, if it ever happens at your table, you can always have that discussion afterwards and say, okay, here's what happened. And then that oftentimes will uncover if there was some missing gap in information, because as a GM, sometimes you feel like you think you told them something and maybe you didn't, or there was something that they interpreted one way, you meant it one way, they took it another way. There's definitely a lot of ways you can have that miscommunication. And ultimately, if the logic kind of is obvious, then, and hopefully everyone takes it the right way, you learn from it, you move on. I had a group that they went and explored these hills, and they found this kind of cave, which was where they wanted to go in the hills. And the cave there were totems, there were signs of past. It was obviously occupied. They decided to build their camp right in front of the cave, like literally right there. Like, here's the clearing, we're a little side of the side of the hill. We're putting our thing right there. And I went, all right, and they did it. And so the next couple of days, as they were trying to explore this cave, they had nothing but trouble with this cave, but they wouldn't with this camp, because they got attacked in the night and they were harassed, and sort of all this stuff happened. And talking to them outside the game, they knew it was kind of a dumb idea. They were not saying like, well, you should have told us it was a bad idea. It's like, no, they kind of knew after they did it, but they just became invested in it. And they were determined. They tried to fortify it. They did all kinds of stuff to try to make this camp work, even though it was this bad idea. But, to their credit, they ran with it, they embraced it, and they did it. And it was bad, and I think they won't do that again. And, that to me is totally fine. I think it's where the trouble can come is if you have this disconnect between what you feel like you're communicating as a GM and what the players feel like they're getting as sort of their information landscape, and they're not really matching up, and you don't address it, then that can lead to a lot of frustration.
Major Andy?
I don't know that I have anything to add. You guys have done really well. I'm trying to think of something that sounds smart. I don't think I have anything that sounds smart. I feel as a GM that the more I get them to interact, the more invested they are. But you have to be careful that you don't let them interact in a way that changes or dictates parts of the story. I think we've talked about in the past, there's a game that allows the players to basically put in a chip of some type, or a point or whatever, coin, I don't care what they call it. And they get to decide something about the setting, scenario, whatever, such as in the room that was windowless and you can't get out, now suddenly has a window. Well, that changes the scenario that you were trying to do. So I don't necessarily care for those, but if they want to explore flowers in the field, well, why wouldn't I let them have flowers in the field? I might not let them have black lotuses so that they're killing each other, but sure, you can find flowers in the field. As much as you can, I think you should let the players help world build. It increases their investment, increases their fun. And everybody else said smart stuff, so there you go.
All right.
I got nothing today.
I'm more of Bob Ross. I paint the overall general landscape, It has details in there to cover all the basic 5 senses, and from those general descriptions, while I can easily rattle off a dozen different questions for each of the basic journalistic questions of who, what, when, where, why, and how, it should leave at least 2 to 3 questions that anyone and everyone should give, and I encourage it profusely from the very start of my games to the very last grand finale of any campaign I run for players to always ask questions. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't even matter if your character supposedly doesn't know it or isn't great at it. Doesn't mean that they're not going to be great at it in that moment. And from there, the players themselves fill in all of the details for my general landscape, so that I don't lay everything out to such a degree and level of detail to where there are no surprises. I do, however, sit there and put it to where if they want to explore more in a given room, a given building, a portion of town, a city, a capital, a region, a continent, the world, they can. Whether it was on script or not, I tend to have, at minimum, 3 different things going on at any given time. From those 3 options, there are a subsequent 3 options for those. If they go off of any of those, great. If they choose door number 5 out of the first 4 doors, okay, let's see where it goes. I'll come up with something on the fly, write it down, and write their reactions down as they do it. But the players themselves do all of the legwork. The trick and the key as the DM is to never make it feel like legwork for the players, to where they have to do it. If they don't want to do it, great, okay, no worries. If they do it, great, okay, and they get something out of it. Because maybe they find something out that will make the next part of whatever plot and story they're currently in slightly easier. Or maybe they get some key piece of information that is 5 steps ahead of wherever they're currently at in whatever plot they're currently doing. Beyond that, I don't expect players to do it. I don't make players do it. If players want to do it, great. If there is 1 player or 2 players out of a given party that are the ones that are always asking the question, I let them do it for the most part, and then I kind of resort back to my old professor days of I just start calling on random people at the table. What are you looking at? What are you hearing? Where are you looking? Where are you while the party is doing this? And then go from there.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and do our product promotion section here. Who would like to go first? And if you got links or a Discord, or anything you're selling or anything you want to announce that's coming up, go ahead and toss us in chat or give us a quick spiel on it if you don't got a link for something. I'll go first, Pex. Okay, glad you volunteered, Pex. Well, if you'd like to continue supporting this podcast and the one we do on Fridays, you can certainly make a monthly donation here for less than the price of a Coke or a pack of gum. Well, maybe not a pack of gum. Gum's expensive these days. Or donate more if you want. I will not say no to you throwing money at me.
I can go next if you like. Because I'm quite excited because as of Friday, Motocross Machination's newest adventure is finally available to buy in print. The proof came back and it was not screwed up for a change, which is good. I feel like that's a major stepping stone in my publishing career. Until the end of the month, I've got a discount on it, which basically gives you the book pretty much at cost or very close to it, which I'll toss in here very shortly. It's called Brutal Impairment in the Bag of Infinite Holding, and it came from a stupid player comment about putting bags within bags within bags, and what if they didn't explode? And then, so it's got a whole bunch of mini locations that all link up in some way. It's got a bunch of characters, quite strange characters. It's system neutral, and it's got a table of 50 thematic random items, including a whole variety of cod pieces, which is important in a product, I find. So I'm almost worried about interrupting the nice discussion that's going on in the channel with my product placement, but I'll do it anyhow. So yeah, you can find more stuff on my blog as well at motocrush.com.
I'll go. www.fossagames.com. You can also pick up our stuff on RPG Drive-Thru. Personally, if you want to find me, you can find me somewhere here on Discord, usually, or Twitch TV, because I've started streaming video games, because I apparently like to curse at them a lot. And you can find me at Twitter at GMandDJ. There you go. I'm pretty easy to find.
Oh, I'm
Mine's
Todd
is-
at Hex. Sorry, go ahead.
Todd. No.
Okay.
you're
Now,
good.
my website is Hexpress, hex.press, and I will drop my YouTube channel link in the forum.
Mine is even easier, and it's quite a show. You can go to tencarstavern.com and join us for all the fun and excitement we have every week. We currently have the Lost Lands Kickstarter up by Fraud Gods Games, with which we have just crossed the $105,000 goal. So another RPG has dropped for PDF. And we also have the open content license, which will do lots of fun and fascinating things for those that are writers, designers, creators, and makers. And then, come to froggodgames.com. Buy our stuff. Our Dead Tree versions of the books will bend and break even the backs of the sturdiest players. Also, you can find me pretty much anywhere on the web as Black Mage or Mage of some slant.
All right. Well, we're going to open up the chat here for Q&A. So if you got questions, feel free to ask after I unmute you. If you don't have a mic, well, feel free to type it in chat, and one of us will snag it.
Don't everyone jump at once.
They never do. Sometimes you have to coax them. Like
Candy.
trails of, I was going to say leaving trails of like M&Ms or Skittles or something.
Hey, this is Blue Griffin. I'm going to go back to the first topic. With the meaningful journey thing. It's fine to have the journeys in game as long as they connect Adventure A with Adventure B with Adventure C, and having side quests that sort of fit within the context of that point. But to have the party just go running willy-nilly about the world, when as a DM you've had something planned up for a session or 3 sessions, that sort of waylays things a bit. And being a living world, there are consequences to actions. The newer editions, they make the fast travel things easier, but in a point when you have a session plan where you're getting them from point A to point B, and they just snap of a finger, you're already at point B, they miss out a lot of things like clues and stuff that you've already planned for.
Yeah, but then in turn, that makes it more difficult, not less, because any of those clues that they missed out on by doing the fast travel, they now don't have now that they are at whatever location they are going to. So now they are going in completely blind and 100% Arctic frozen, versus having a little bit of prep and maybe some type of wherewithal for 1 to 2 corners of the general puzzle and if maybe more, but now they know it's a puzzle and they have no idea what shape it is, let alone how many pieces are there. And that works too.
I'm going to be devil's advocate here. And this is not to say that how you run your game or anything is wrong. But when you say that, the GM plans stuff out and they're just running off willy-nilly and it not good for the timeline of the story and stuff for the GM or for the players, because it sounds like it's just not what you, the GM, wants. Which, again, the table is everybody, including the GM, so you should be having fun too. However, I still say that, is this a problem that is just you or with the GM, or is this a problem with the entire table?
I find it being that since I've invested so much time in trying to plan the adventures off, to have them also take the left hook that's been presented with the intentions of getting to it at a later time where I can have time to plan things out. That's where I'm getting at. As a GM who's also is given the options that the party says, "Oh, let's just go ahead and do this." That was my hope. If I didn't make that self clear, the options are presented, but you've got things planned as a GM that those options are to be taking place at a later time.
Then, I mean, that sounds less of prep. That sounds more of you put it in the wrong spot.
Or
never put anything in your world in a game session when you're running it that you don't want the players to interact with.
Right
if it's
now.
meant for a later, if it's meant for a later time and a later date, and you want them to get there, give them. Then it dead ends.
Got a question from Ripples here. Do you think the fast travel and not stopping to enjoy the journey is related to time management and accounting in the game system? For example, in D&D 5e, there is no system for controlling and monitoring time, so it seems easier to handwave sections of that way travel, but I was thinking more of the accounting of time. Like sleep, meals, taxes, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it's very much a question of what does the game want to do. And in D&D, you find you focus around the dungeons, the actions, the exploring and stuff of particular locales, and less about travels. On the other hand, you have a game like Lord of the Rings, where travel is a huge part of it, like the journey is part of it, and there you need meaningful rules in order to make it a meaningful part of the game and make it fun as well.
Does D&D 5e not have travel rules? I think they do have stuff, right?
They have the mount rules, yeah, but it's just like general ticking of time, like a time accounting for any and whatever thing. I think that comes more down to house ruling, like taxes take a week long to complete kind of deal. How long does it take an average person to eat a meal? Well, I would use how long does it take you to eat a meal kind of deal. And
exactly, you use real world facsimiles for the vast majority of it. Everything except for how far you can travel in a given 8-hour period of a day is up to the DM, and is not exclusively, but is pretty much DM fiat. So what time of the morning is it? Okay, are you running off of where did you leave off last game session? Even if you're in a dungeon, you, the DM, know what time of day or night it is, and what day of the year it is.
But I think the question is more about, do you feel like the rules support time being fiat waived, or that the rules support encouraging the journey? And personally, I think some games are better at that than others. I mean, just like with almost every other thing in tabletop RPGs, certain games lead themselves better to certain rule sets, lead themselves to certain styles better. I don't know that D&D is worse, but yeah.
That also goes to the general gameplay aspect of, are you running your games as is verbatim, Or do you look at the rule books and say, okay, I like this, and you also manage to read the very first page past the copyright page that says everything in here is a guideline, not a rule. Use, ignore, or modify as is your want.
I totally agree with you, but I will say that in my experience, newer GMs and certain types of mindsets lead themselves to much stricter reading of rules and less fiat. So, and I still think
that comes with time and experience.
Better. Oh yeah, absolutely.
It boils to the core mechanics, even as a player: time, patience, practice, and a fuck ton of failure.
Given enough God, the failures.
Given enough of all of those, which will only come with time and patience, you will have enough of a wherewithal to have your own internal rule book for any system you play. Whether you choose to just play one system or game type of D&D, Pathfinder, Hackmaster, FASA stuff, Shadowrun, World of Darkness, old, new, modern, whatever, you can do that. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And there is a facet of life that is exciting for that. Or you're, someone like myself who pretty much tries a bit of everything. And some I've run longer than others. Some I've only had scattering of, or I just play one-offs at conventions for, or run one-offs at conventions for. And I just cook it up as I go along. If it feels right in the books, go with it. But if you're starting out as a DM, use the book. It's what it's there for. It's a guide. It's to help you out. If you don't understand, this is not 25, 30 years ago when I first started playing. This isn't 40 years ago when the game was at its height and we were all devil worshippers. This isn't even now going on almost 50 years ago when the game first started off, where you had the choice of Pony Express smoke signals or a 3-month parcel mail to get a response to a question you might have. You can now use your phone, tweet, send a text message, or just go to any. Yeah, you can use technomancy now and find the entire collective mind of gaming on the web. And if you don't like somebody's particular point of view on a particular topic or subject, there's more than one person talking about the same topic. So if you don't understand what they say, find it somewhere else.
Oh, yeah. But like I said, go ahead.
To answer your question, Ripples, yes, I do think it adds to the journey. If you track time, I have my players use a calendar, and there's a calendar for every city because every city functions differently. There are taxes within the calendar, or special holidays, or things that tie them to the world more, and that adds to the journey because they've only got like 9 months to be back to town before they got to pay their family taxes because that's the thing in my game. Taxes are important, or they got to be back for such and such religious holiday. Or they have to head somewhere for such and such religious holiday. These are things that happen in games I run, and I think it adds value to those games. If you have a table where two shits aren't given about those kind of things, well, maybe you don't use it.
Yeah. And that's where the fiating and hand waving comes in. Because some tables use it, some tables don't. Some DMs like it, some don't.
I'm definitely a big proponent of time as far as a factor of adventuring. But again, it's one of those things. It's a style thing. It's a table thing. I think some players, as we talked about the first time around, really just want to get on to the next thing, whatever that is, whether it's the next plot point, their next challenge, the next combat. And for them, it's all about how can we get there as fast and as smoothly and without issue as possible. And I get that to a degree. I remember I was trying to play in a game of Into the Odd, and we were just trying to get we were in the city and we're supposed to get to this kind of sewer area, and we felt like we were just running into roadblocks, things that detour us, and I think they were meant to be interesting and they were meant to kind of give us an idea of the world. They're meant to be sort of immersive, but all it felt to us was like, man, can we just get to where the adventure is, please? It really was just like, come on. After a while, I was like, what path can we take where we can just not, what street can we walk down? We're not going to run into a weird accident in the road or a bureaucrat that set up some bureaucracy, set up some kind of roadblock or something else. Like we just wanted to get where we were going. So I kind of get that, and obviously there's degrees of how much is too much and what are the point of all these things. But there's definitely, I think, a very table dependent on kind of what kind of game you want. Do you want to sort of be in that exploration sort of, we're going to go around and do that, or do we just want to get down to kind of a pretty linear bang, 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 one thing to the next thing to the next thing?
Also, my games, I use a lot of random encounters, and they're usually on a clock of some form, either by distance or every 5 minutes kind of deal, depending on what we're doing. So timekeeping is important, in my opinion.
Yeah, but it's also something you have to start out from the very beginning, to where, regardless of if you track time, the type of time you keep track of, even if you're generalizing it to where you can do it like Todd said and go bang bang, and you're now from A to B, how much time took place? How much time elapsed? So then, even with you hand waving traveling and the journey aspect, so that you're getting to all the various points and plot points that you've laid out and that the players are going to engage with or currently engaged with, how much time has elapsed? Because if you start that from the beginning, then if and when your play style and gaming style and DMing style change, you've already set that basis. It's no longer an exception, it's just part of the game mechanics. Versus if you just hand wave it and it's very arbitrary or not used at all, and then you start introducing it, it feels very weird, very foreign, and it can lopside a game because now you have this new element that is slightly crucial to the larger aspect of the game that has not been introduced prior to now. And in some cases, prior to now could be 3 game sessions over the last week, or 100 or more game sessions over the last 5 years. And if you're on the first end, it's not too bad. If you're on the second option, that's kind of scary, especially for a lot of players.
Right, and just one more thing on my end. There's a game mechanic, actually, that if you reach a certain age, you die. So you can have like a heart attack or keel over in the tavern outhouse like Elvis because you reached a certain age. So that's another reason mechanically for why I track time, or my players track time as well.
Oh, absolutely. Player races have ages and maximum ages. And whatever the player chose to make their character's age at has an expiration date on it, naturally. Beyond just rocks fall, everyone dies.
Right, that's part of my character creation, actually, is roll to see when you will die. What age you get at. But I think Chevron has a question. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. You lit up, but nothing came out, I'm afraid.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, hello everyone.
Morning, afternoon, evening.
Good morning.
So my question is that thank you for your suggestion about the material you use. But my question is, do you have some kind of material that have DM advices or show different DM styles? And I would like to put as an example the Cyberpunk 2020 Listen Up You Primitive Screwheads, which even addresses specific problems of the game or of the setting.
I mean, there's so many DM-centric blogs, podcasts, vlogs, Twitches out there. I can give you
And
some
YouTube videos.
Yeah, YouTube as well. There's just so much. What in particular are you looking for versus a vagueness here?
So the reason that I'm asking for a specific product, so to say, is because I believe that one of the problems that exist that when you DMs try to start is that there might be too much but not too clear, because every YouTuber or every blogger has a specific way of thinking. And I have noticed that in some books, as I said, like the one of Cyberpunk 2020, not only was promoting a specific mindset, but it was all also tailored in the problems that one might face in the specific setting and RPG.
Some more beginner, generic friendly.
Yes, so to say.
I kind of feel like a lot of Played by the Apocalypse sort of games have really good DM centric tips about how their games work. Usually it's obviously mostly comparing, contrasting how it might be with the basic Played by the Apocalypse setup, but I feel like a lot of those have good advice, and I feel like a lot of the moves and things that Played by the Apocalypse you can apply to different games. So I feel like a lot of those books do good jobs with that.
Here, I'll just drop a series of links in chat.
Sly Flourish's Return of the Lazy DM. While it is, the original was geared for 3.5, and when 4th edition D&D first came out, it was still system neutral and agnostic because everything in there was system neutral. Because it's ideas and theories and what he has tested and what he has polled and asked questions of DMs. The Return of the Lazy DM is, again, it's still system agnostic. This time it is more geared for 5th edition D&D, as he has revised and updated a lot of his stuff and added in new material and asked new questionnaire questions from a larger group of DMs. So they fit rather well with 5e D&D, but you could take the same principles and ideas and put it in Sword and Wizardry. You can put it in Osric, Beckme, BX, Cyberpunk 2020, Plagued by the Apocalypse, Call of Cthulhu, World of Darkness. You can put it in a LARP game, and it will still run well. You're just plugging and chugging the mechanical names and jargon in SKU and in substitution for the 5e mechanical names. Everything else stays the same, but you're doing the reverse of what a game book or a core game book does, which, if you strip the mechanics out, there's very little flavor. Where in this, you strip the mechanicals out, there's a ton of context and information in there that is still viable.
Okay, thank you for your answers. Could I continue with questions?
Absolutely.
So, we are DMs, we prepare something, but I have noticed that sometimes you might give like a week or 2 weeks or even a month reading something. And when you present that to the players, they might interact only 5 minutes. And I have seen DMs that try to put more focus on this kind of stuff, but it ends up dragging the game, or the players feel it like some kind of railroading. What do you suggest for a situation like this? This
Move on.
over-preparation, so to say.
I would move on to what the players are more interested in. I mean, play out what you're playing out, but I wouldn't burden them with trying to. You work 7 hours of putting this really cool thing together. They have to play out 14 hours of it. No. If they're bored when they're bored and the game moves on.
I would suggest with starting with not putting 14 hours into any particular thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
in the game
that
itself,
would be my
yes,
first
but
one.
in
Is
one aspect, no.
so. I mean, like when you're planning your game, and I just had a conversation with a lady who's starting to GM, and she had this great idea. She has this box, and the players had to figure out how to open it. And I'm like, okay, so how do they open it? Because they tried the last session and they couldn't get it open. She's like, oh, they have to cast a light spell on it. And I looked at her and I said, okay, that's kind of cool, but how would they know that? And she looks at me, she goes, well, they have to figure it out. How?
What descriptor clues have you handed out up till now to know that a spell of some type has to be cast, let alone the spell itself?
Exactly. So here's the thing. When you're coming up with stuff, don't come up with something that's going to need 20 hours to figure out, because they don't want to do that. No one wants to sit there and bang their head against the wall for 20 hours. What are you doing? Why is it important that they know this? And what other ways can they get that object information, whatever it is? And that's just something that as a GM, you should be basically pre-planning to some degree. So if they're all bored and need to move on, then the game moves on. If they
You
really
might
need
also
that
say-
information, you know,
You might
find
also
another
say
way.
designing. You should design the adventure.
You should, yeah. But when you design it to have other options for figuring out the very important place of the key.
I find this aspect of designing very interesting, as it said. And my other question, if I can do so as a follow-up, would be that before some of you said that the idea that the DM has for the game, what the DM has prepared. But I noticed that in some games, let's say in some older dungeons or adventures, or even the idea of the sandbox, it is that I just put stuff on the map and then people interact with it. So and that's why for me the idea that I have something prepared and people cannot get over it and that's a problem might seem a bit weird to me.
That goes into how each GM runs preps and does their game. Easiest one I could tell you is the Alexandrian's basic rule of 3, because you have the same problem from two ends of the spectrum. If you don't give enough options of things to do in a given game session for the players, it becomes a railroad inherently. If you give too many options, then it becomes a standstill, because now there's a glut of choices and they become immobile from the fear and just the glut of choices that they have at hand and at their disposal.
Isn't that though a part of the game to do the right or the wrong choice, or just do it a choice and see where it
Well, no.
goes?
It's not the right or wrongness of it, but it's you give just enough choices for any given aspect so that the players always have a choice of something to do, and you always inherently have the option of whatever the players actually do. So there's the 3 options you've prepped, and then there's door number 4 of whatever the players do. So if they don't pick any of the 3 options you prepped and they go with door number 4, then you go with door number 4 and you learn over time to improvise, adapt, and overcome. So that you become more flexible, not only in that game, but in general as a DM. And that goes back to time, patience, practice, and a fuck ton of failure. Not everything is going to be a stellar rockstar hit the first time out, even if it looks legendary in your head or when you write it down and prep it out.
I'll give you an example here. Players are traveling on a road. Fork left has bandits on it. Fork right has no bandits on it. They go right. Well, guess what? Those bandits just ended up on the right fork.
Yeah, they don't know which side you put them on. People do this all the time in mods. So, and there's nothing wrong with being that type of GM, but sometimes what you do is if the module says that the monster is in room A and they went to room B, you just put the monster in B.
Yeah.
I want to say I'm completely okay with that. It's when players are like, well, we look for signs of the bandits. And then you're like, well, they're over here on the left. And then they choose to go right. And then you move the bandits. That's
well, then no, that's dumb.
No.
Yeah, that's literally the whole idea behind the Quantum Ogre. It's when the players do something. Like, you get to make choices as a DM. You can make an encounter list and say, these encounters are going to happen in this order, and they're going to happen wherever the players are. But then if the players start taking action to subvert that, empower them. Let them avoid encounters and stuff. Don't force your...
Yeah, I was gonna mention that same thing. I'm not a fan of the Quantum Ogre for that very reason, that if I decide that the ogre
I wrote
or
it,
the pack of wolves...
Like, that's me. I'm the Quantum Ogre.
Okay. No, I mean, I don't...
No, I mean, what I'm saying
is
that the Quantum Ogre is
we
that.
can reset
What
the
I'm saying
clock.
right here is that you get to make decisions. You get to
right,
make
I
those
understand.
choices.
And I think that was one of the things I think in the Frog God, that good adventure design book, actually it uses that concept, and it drove me nuts because I like the book, but there's one of it might even be the first adventure that they their little mini adventure where there's, I think, you could take 3 paths through a forested hill, and there's a pack of wolves that shows up on one hand, and that the adventure or this little mini adventure says specifically, well, if they didn't encounter the wolves because they took one of the other paths, then the wolves are just going to show up later. And I don't like it. I don't feel as a GM that pack of wolves encounter is so great that I couldn't just come up with something else if I needed an encounter, that I need to like recycle the pack of wolves. And I want players to use their abilities, and that does kind of circumvent them using things.
Well, that's going different than the Quantum Ogre. That's going different to the Quantum Ogre. The Quantum Ogre states that the players have already asked the question and investigated, are the bandits on the left-hand path? Yes. Then they go take the right-hand path. This is, they never investigated the left-hand path. They chose the right path. So you don't necessarily have to throw the pack of wolves or the ogre in the right-hand path. But somewhere past the right-hand path and wherever they're going, they may run into that same ogre or that pack of wolves. You can also easily white out the pack of wolves and put in Eder caps.
Something.
No, I see what you're saying.
Random cobalt.
I see what you're saying as far as the choice goes.
If they've already investigated and asked the questions, and now they are actively engaging the world, then they reap the benefits of, they actually get to choose a safe path that doesn't involve combat. Whether it's a short combat, a long combat, whatever, they don't have to worry about it.
It's not just about paths either. It's about any sort of decision you're trying to nullify as a GM. Any wizard switch, it doesn't matter what you do. It's illusionism. I'm taking away your agency. Like, it doesn't have to be in selecting a direction. It can be during combat where you're just, moving the hit point totals around arbitrarily so that the fight goes the way you want it, even though the players had a thing that would have killed them earlier. Anytime you're trying to force an outcome by, not just forcing an outcome, but forcing an outcome by nullifying player choice. That's what I intended to present with the Quantum Ogre, that being bad.
Sorry, I should have expanded the example, but yes, it was to what Mage was saying, that they didn't do the investigation for said bandits kind of analogy, that you could just simply move them over to the right.
Right. I got you on that.
No, I was totally right there with you, man.
But yeah, but I think that they're right in the other idea, which is that if they specifically look and say, no, we don't want to fight the bandits, we know they're over there, we're going to go this way, then you go that way and they don't fight the bandits. Now, the bandits are still bandits and will go do banditing things, which may affect them somehow later.
Exactly. Or
But
it depends on if you chose the right-hand path and you're not sneaky and you're gallivanting, like you're carousing out of a tavern at 3 o'clock in the morning and you're being loud, obnoxious, raucous, and everyone's wearing field plate armor, which is spectacularly not stealthy, then even though you took the right-hand path that doesn't have the bandits are going to hear the marauding band of Don Quixotes tilting windmills on the right-hand side and be like, maybe they have some gold, and come check it out. That is not screwing player agency. That is turning player agency on its head, because while they made the right choice and they chose not to enter combat, they are now going to enter combat because they thought they were safe and now they are not, due to their own choices and how they acted. But then that's also on the DM to describe, how are you going about the right-hand path? Are you being stealthy? Are you doing a casual stroll? Are you singing bawdy songs? If you as the DM are not asking these questions, or the players are not asking these questions as far as the investigation, or you are not giving some type of reply in some meaningful way as the DM to the answers to your questions from the players, that when it kind of turns pear-shaped.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I guess I feel like on the one hand, so for example, in this little adventure with the bandits, if I remember, they checked the path originally, they didn't go, but then I have to remember later on, because the module specifically says, hey, if they didn't encounter them before they're here, I have to make that memory switch. And if I don't, then that ends up being where I'm nullifying their choices potentially. The other thing is, reason maybe I don't like it, is that I feel like unless I'm somehow cramped for space that I can't afford to have 2 different counters, that I have to go back and reuse assets earlier. Like, I guess I just don't understand why I even need to do that. Why not just have something else? Why do I need to, to recycle these bandits when, I could just use Eder caps or something else. And if it's a published module that I'm getting, were they running right up against their page counts that they had to to make this one encounter work for 3 or 4 different possibilities. Just give me a fresh encounter. Usually when I see with people running their games, it's like a big encounter, like they had a real sort of set piece sort of encounter, and they don't want to waste it, so they're going to repurpose it for something small, like bandits or wolves or whatever. It's just like, just give me something that's more in line with what's happening there, as opposed to a generic piece.
I think that depends on whether or not the bandits were more important to the greater story. If the bandits were just random fucking bandits, then who gives a shit?
Pretty
If
much.
the bandits were part of a greater story, that they're attacking lots of things in the area and that it's affecting the townsfolk, blah, 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 and they were going to ask for your help anyhow, then it matters more. If it was just a wolf and they go, hey, yeah, there's like a horde of dire wolves over there. Screw that shit. We're going to sneak this way. And they sneak that way. Okay, fine. If the dire
farming
wolves
community loses a couple of cows throughout the entirety of the pre-published adventure, nothing
maybe the
matters.
bandits.
If the dire wolves are controlled by a wizard that's an important bad guy in the story, then that may have something else. Heck, we're not gonna fight. I heart you. I totally do. We just don't always agree. But I heart you.
I love you, man.
I do.
But not like that.
Maybe, I don't know. I've met
kidnap babies. Let's go with that.
I mean, at least not before the first pot of coffee.
Oh, dude. I've got to be like through my first pot of tea already. It's been a very long night. But yeah, I think that it matters on if it's something to the greater story.
Moving on from our baby kidnapping bandits, does anybody else have a question?
You're on the air, caller number 1. What would you like to ask?
Hi, hello. Would like to ask about investment in the game.
Are you looking for short-term futures, long-term futures, year-to-date return on investment? What type of investments are you looking for? What type of stock portfolio are you looking for?
I'm looking into NPC investment, the one that doesn't have a big insurance life one.
Disposable NPCs, yes. Those are very intriguing.
Those are fun.
Actually, I'm looking for people with a lot of cash from unknown people that would like to invest in my town. And maybe in future wise to bond with the people here, maybe get families here and create a castle in the future.
Those are a lot of separate things. They can all come together eventually, but from the get-go, they are not necessarily something that you try to piece together as one item. Where to pull the NPCs from? Yes is the short answer. Anywhere, everywhere, everywhere is the answer. Books, literature, ancient, current, modern, every genre, every platform, every medium. Anyone from anywhere. You can even go so far, because it's a home game and you don't have to worry about intellectual property, copyright defamation, liable characters. You can steal people directly from the books and use the same exact name, even the same exact race, and shove it into your game. If you're running something at a con, maybe, change it up slightly, or, change the first letters of the first and last name, and, oh, that's that guy. Nah, maybe. I mean, bears a striking resemblance. How to build the families out? That's just over the course of time and how much time you have in your system. Whether or not you want to build a stronghold or a fortress, a castle, a keep of some size or stature, or long-term settlement for the players, that's if they're even interested in it.
Actually, the way that I phrased the question was wrong, because my question / suggestion was to do. I have noticed that the more things that you give the players that they need help with, the more they are interested in the world, and that's why they start to invest on the local towns, and then they start to care about those. Do you have similar experiences?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
So, I mean, that's the basic building blocks.
you can, I mean, and it works both ways. You can either get them to be connected to an NPC and then use the NPC to help connect them to other parts of the world. Like, oh, I need help with this thing. And since we're buddies and at the tavern, could you help me out? Or since you rescued me, it turns out I was only on this road to help save my brother, right? Whatever. Or you can use events to get them to saving the village because it's the right good thing to do means that you spend more time with the villagers and now you're even more connected. So, I mean, it works both ways. And
Yep.
it's awesome world building.
And then you just build up from there, and that's how the game evolves, not only in the depth and the vitality of the game, but that's how the game changes as the characters level up and as the world grows and expands. Because you go from helping villagers in small towns, hamlets, farming communities, to small cities, to capitals, to kingdoms and simulacrums, to continents. And that's how pretty much every system and any RPG for tabletop ends up building the players up. On the DM side, it's for you to figure out how you are going to incorporate them, and the easiest way to do it is to start small. And then you slowly build on that, which builds on the last step, which builds on the last step, and each new step expands the horizon for each new level. So you can still, even after the fact that you just helped save the kingdom from an invasion, still go to a farming community and help them out and rebuild. And I mean, you can hand wave it away by simply throwing gold at the problem. You can be more hands-on and get your hands dirty and go there yourself and help rebuild and connect with these people. Maybe they are former nobility. Maybe they're retired adventurers that have information or connections to other places in the world, and how those connections can be made by the players and where they can go from there are just more options and choices on what the players can do. And there's always, it's like a great mechanic working on a car. There's always a small box of parts left over when you're done fixing the car. There's always something left on the table for the players to do next time. Even if they don't know it yet, because you haven't actually given it out yet, because they're in the middle of a dungeon or a major combat, it's still there. Once that's done, that's when you can start laying out all these little breadcrumbs and then see what they pick and pick it up and run with it.
Okay, thank you for your answer. To combine that also with the next question, I have the feeling sometimes.
Gab, can I ask you a question real quick?
Of course.
Are you studying us like primates in the wild?
I study the different DMs on the internet, and I'm doing a documentary on it.
I see. Because he showed up at our show, and I feel like I'm a researcher.
This definitely is starting to feel like a research article questionnaire, and I'm loving it because I do.
Been on the
other side like a few times.
I just wanted to tease him a little bit. I'm sorry to interrupt, Gab. Would you please continue?
I call it the life with the DM bloggers.
Start writing it. We need to get you your own channel. Then you can have your own show. Then we can start asking you questions. That'll be the fun part.
Oh no.
Oh yeah. No, totally.
Oh, it's going to happen. We'll make it happen.
Then can I still go with questions or not?
Oh yeah, man.
Okay, so you said something very interesting about how the DM handles it and how he shows and incorporates those stuff. And I must say that in some games that I have played, I felt that the races of characters one can choose, after a while, it feels just human with extra abilities. So one of my big question is that how much or what kind of techniques you use in order to show what means to be the X race on a different world.
Sorry, so it's about, like really different races? I mean, I think one of the things is that we're all humans, right? So I think our default is always going to be humans with something special. It would be very interesting to play races that really have very little humanoid or humanoidisms. I don't know, whatever they would be. What would it be like if everyone was playing? They're all gelatinous cubes or some kind of slimes or something else. But I think that would be really hard for us to do. It'd be really interesting and creative to try it. But I think that our minds, being sort of human themselves, we're going to kind of all fall somewhat into that old Star Trek kind of bit of having humans with different faces, heads, and arms and everything, but kind of essentially human underneath.
Maybe I can help you. So in one of my games, I showed that the elves are like very xenophobic and dangerous. But the thing was that the humans in the nearby village actually believed that as well. So to actually like see an elf or whatever was that this is a very weird and extraordinary creature. Why is it there?
Oh, I see. So it's more like the mental playing of having the different races actually, or species, be really kind of strange to each other. I mean, I think that there's like the game that I run, everybody's human. And I haven't even really introduced different elves or dwarf types yet. They, as far as the players know, they don't even exist. And we play from that aspect of you really are investigating something new, so everything is strange and unusual, and all these different things you're seeing are really kind of more alien. But I think that you're still working against sort of a player meta knowledge that they're going to see an elf and go, oh, that's an elf, and then you have to fight against that with the sort of, I guess, reinforcing the fact that they're not the elves that you may think of from D&D or from whatever media that you're with. You have to keep kind of reinforcing that difference of, how much away from what we commonly understand about elves in popular culture that your elves are. But I think you can do that, and you can have a lot of fun with that. Dwarves that aren't living under rocks and miners and elves that are xenophobic. Though that's elves being xenophobic is actually not that unusual. It's kind of, I think, a common trope for elves. But whatever, elves that are urban instead of forests, forest bound or things like that. You can have a lot of fun playing against the common tropes.
I'd like to say I work for Lamentations, and one of Raggy's rules is humans only. Like I would also question very much why it needs to be an elf. Like, I think there are reasons for something to be an elf or dwarf, but we should consider that, like, when we change the race, or we have a race in a fantasy setting specifically, why? Like, why, if a human culture could replace it, then is it necessary?
It's a good question. I didn't know that Raggy was humans only. I mean, the core book has elves and dwarves in it. So does the humans only come in and materials that they write?
I mean, like, he was originally writing a clone of BX, but as he's moved forward, his baseline setting is 17th century Earth, right? That's where most of the adventures take place. Like mine take place in the 1700s, both of them. So,
okay, interesting. I didn't know that.
I think also the dwarves are pretty much gem addicts or workaholic or something, right? I mean, in the
Who's
book
a
of
workaholic?
I think in the book of the Lamentation of the Flame Princess, that the dwarves are shown as workaholic or having some kind of work addiction.
Yeah, but that goes back right from actual mythology and stuff. In the Norse myths, dwarves were very productive, very constructive. They made most of the gods' weapons and artifacts in that realm. So to say that, and it's like that in almost any fantasy settings that I've come across, is that the dwarves were very, very productive, very constructive, very active.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a point, like I think that was mentioned, about if they're going to be very different and they're not going to be playing off of our common shared understanding about elves, then don't there's not really much reason to use elf, because when by using elf, you're kind of using a shorthand where you don't have to sort of explain all these other things. You can sort of shorthand it. You can just say, oh, they're an elf, and then play on that understanding. I always like creating my own stuff, and why lean on those stereotypes and tropes of elves and dwarves if you don't need to? Just make your own creatures, and that way when your party comes across them, then they really have that same kind of unknown that you want to engender, because they won't know what they are, and they won't be able to lean on the fact that, oh, it's an elf or oh, it's a dwarf, because they're something totally unique to your world.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. I think that will wrap it up for this Breakfast Club. Make sure to join us next week. And if so inclined, feel free to donate money.